You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. How can neuroscience and shamanism combine to create lasting change in the mind and body? Find out in today's inspiring episode. This episode contains adult subject matter and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore the fascinating intersection of shamanism and neuroscience, uncovering how ancient healing traditions align with modern understandings of the brain. Our guest shares how spiritual practices passed down through generations connect with the latest research in neuroplasticity, offering a unique perspective on transformation and healing. Laura Martinez is a multifaceted professional, seamlessly merging her roles as a spiritual healer, author, speaker, and meditation guide. Drawing on her scientific training and expertise, Laura enriches her approach with a deep understanding of shamanic practices, a legacy she inherited from her great-grandmother Lupe. Rooted in Mexiquito, Texas, Laura's ancestral lineage has been a wellspring of healing wisdom, with her great-grandmother being celebrated for her curandero practice and a unique blend of spiritual insight and holistic approach. Laura delves into the transformative processes that echo Lupe's practices, employing rituals, cleanings, and energy work to address internal obstacles, unraveling the intricate connections between negative brain imagery and neurological patterns that ensnare and haunt our lives. Laura guides individuals through life challenges, viewing them as opportunities for growth. Her sessions are a fusion of neuroscience techniques, holistic approaches, and shamanistic practices tailored to meet the unique needs of each client. A co-author of the groundbreaking textbook Psychoneuroplasticity Protocols in Addiction with Dr. Frank Lawless in 2015, Laura has also contributed to Nature and Animal Rituals, shedding light on the transformative power inherent in ancestral rituals. With a rich background in behavioral neuroscience research, Laura served as a research associate at Texas A&M, focusing on the impact of lead in the brain on addictive cocaine use. She directed a psychoneuroplasticity center in Texas for 8 years, contributing significantly to the understanding of chemical dependency. Laura's expertise extends to the national stage, where she has had the honor of speaking at various conferences, sharing her profound insights on neuroplasticity and spirituality integrated into treatment and healing. Currently based in the Dallas and Fort Worth areas, Laura extends her impactful work through a private practice, offering transformative experiences that blend the realms of science, spirituality, and healing. Let's meet Laura Martinez. Hi, Laura. It's so great to have you back on the podcast today. What a wonderful time we had last time, and I've really been looking forward to reconnecting with you because we will be talking about shamanism and neuroscience, and what a fascinating topic to explore and bring to our listeners. So thank you so much for joining me again, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I know that we always have such a fun time together, and I so enjoy. You guys don't know this because you're just listening to the podcast now, but Petra and I can go on forever and talk. And it's just so great to be in your space again. So thank you for having me back.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. And of course, we have some surprises in store for our audience as well, which will come later on in the year. So there's lots of things to look forward to and to keep in touch about. So we'll give them a little bit of a starter and a taster today as to what you do. And it's such a fascinating topic that I think most people wouldn't put together in that combination, shamanism and neuroscience. So I'm excited to talk about this today. And would you like to start us off with a little bit about your own story? Maybe let our listeners know a bit about how your journey started, where it started, how that connects to what you do today, and maybe a little bit about what it is that you do today.
Right. Yeah. So, I really do feel like my professional journey started from the age of 12 years old without even knowing it. I really got into meditation when I was younger. I think I read a Deepak Chopra book, and that really inspired me to start meditating and do some diving. And my mom reminds me today that I used to have people that would come over and meditate when I was a child. And so I really do think that was preparing me for what I do now. Fast forward to adulthood. I, of course, got my undergrad degree in psychology and neuroscience together. And then I started working at a treatment center. And the treatment center was for substance abuse. And during that time, I was doing some traveling. I really loved to travel. And I went to Costa Rica on a trip, and it was a solo trip. And I happened to and stumbled upon working with a couple of shaman. So it was a couple, and they were so amazing. They have passed since, because this was long ago. I think I was about maybe 19 that time. And that was my first trip, and I worked with them. And then once I started working in treatment, I was going back to visit them, right? So I was bringing the modalities that I was learning from them to work in treatment. And it was so inspirational, because what I saw as a result of merging shamanism and neuroscience. At the time, I was the director of a neuroscience department there. And once I blended these modalities and I was doing shamanic journeys with them, spirit animal journeys, connecting them with their inner child, connecting them with past versions of themselves, connecting them with ancestors. This work was so deep for them. And it was really inspiring to see people transform. Now, when somebody goes to treatment, most of you guys probably already know this, but you usually only have 30, 60, or 90 days to work with a client. So it needs to be impactful work, and it needs to be deep work if you want to make any kind of impact. And I would say that merging neuroscience and shamanism is exactly that.
Wow. I love this topic. And I can tell by how you're talking that you're really passionate about this. And so I would imagine that you've seen quite a lot of transformations and a lot of changes happening when you bring these two things together. How did that impact the people that you worked with in treatment? And obviously, you continued with this, so there must have been something exciting happening about it. So, what were some of the things that you were observing or that you were finding as you were bringing these two things together?
I was seeing a lot of vulnerability. I was seeing a lot of emotions. I was seeing breakthroughs in people's journey. And one of the things that I really loved doing was getting the group. And sometimes I'd work with the male facility, and sometimes I worked with the women's facility. They were separate. And we'd have a group of 20 clients, and we would go through and do a deep shamanic journey, right? Lights off, you got the blindfold on, you're laying down on a mat, and you're breathing, and you're going through a visualization journey. And then from there, the drumming starts, and you start the drumming, and you're taking them through this altered state of reality, or altered state of consciousness. And through that altered state, they get visuals, they get insights. A lot of times people come out of that state once they come back, and this can last anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, right? So you're laying on a mat for a while, you lose complete track of time and space. And when they come out of that, they would say, "What was that?" And I said, "Well, tell me what happened. What did you see?" "I saw a bear, and this bear had me follow them into a cave. And then I saw these past versions of myself that needed to heal." So experiences like that, or I saw my grandma and my grandma's passed, and she gave me words of advice that I needed to hear. So we would get this truly transformational experiences in this container where everybody is having these experiences. And then after the journey is over, we're all sharing with each other. And that vulnerability is there. And, people are emoting and crying and uplifted. And you're sharing this energy with each other and having these circles. They're so sacred because it's almost like we can allow ourselves to be human. We can allow each other to be human. And we can share these truths about ourselves. So I knew the work was magical, and I was kind of doing it low key because I was the director of the facility. I kind of got the ability, fortunately, to do what I wanted to. And I remember the therapist and the clinical staff, because we would have these meetings called treatment team meetings, and they would say, what did you do with this client yesterday? Because they're a completely transformed person today. And they were talking about how they saw this tiger, and we're just really confused. What did you do? And it was exciting, right? Because the word would spread through treatment, like, oh, I worked with Laura and we did this. And then people would come to me at lunch and say, I don't know what he did, but I really want to do that. And so it was a really cool experience. It was exciting. And when I left the treatment facility, because I felt like it was time to start my own private practice, I said, I've got to merge this into, mental health modalities. I don't want to just do talking with a client and helping them get better. I want them to go into action and go inside themselves where they can transform. So that's what I do now.
That sounds so exciting, and definitely a piece that I feel is missing in a lot of different approaches to not just addiction, but also mental health, like you said, is that oftentimes the action component is missing. And it is that missing link where people don't actually get to that transformation or that breakthrough that they need to make changes in their lives. So I find this a really, really great way to get to that point where you actually get to heal things, you get to change things, you get to do things differently going forward. So this to me is a very innovative and groundbreaking way to approach mental health, and one that I feel by what you are telling us now, one that actually creates lasting change, not just a band-aid for 1 hour of feeling better or this or that, but an actual lasting change that fundamentally also changes maybe our brains or our physiology, that makes those kind of really, really deep changes. Now, when we talk about shamanism, a lot of people might have a lot of different ideas of what that looks like. So, do you want to maybe tell us a bit about that? And at the core, what are the practices that usually are applied in shamanism that you work with? You talked to us about the visualization that happened, the drumming. What are sort of the core components of that? And what can people think of when you say, okay, I'm working with a shaman on this? What does that look like for them?
I love that question because that's one of the questions I always have to answer if I'm on a consult with someone and they don't know exactly what they're getting into. And I always say shamanism is not a spirituality, it's not even a religion. It's basically a mechanism of healing. And that mechanism of healing is the belief that you can heal yourself. And you can heal yourself using nature, the elements like water, earth, air, fire. You can heal yourself this way by using spirit animals and ancestors and guardian angels and your higher power of whatever higher power that might be. And coming back to the breath and allowing yourself to have perspective shifts. And so it's really all about self healing. And so my role in that self healing with the client is teaching them how to heal themselves. And so I'm not in the business of warehousing clients. I know a lot of times, sometimes practitioners will keep a client on for like 5 or 6 or 10 years. I don't do that. I really want to teach you the skills that you need to have. It's all about lifestyle changes. And a lot of times I'll ask my clients, like, What are you watching on TV? What are you reading? What are you drinking? What are you eating? What kind of friends and family do you have around you? What kind of partner do you have? Because this is so important. And I think sometimes we miss, what does our lifestyle actually look like? So, shamanism is really inviting that person back into alignment with themselves, going out in nature, getting sunlight in their eyes, being able to breathe, meditate, using visualization. Another key component of shamanism is going into altered states of consciousness to heal. Shamans believe, and this is physics as well, which is why I love science and spirituality together. But shamans believe that we go into altered states of reality, that our soul can travel and go into these multiple universes, right? Multiverse, I think, is what we call it in physics. But we go into these different altered states of dimensions, and our soul can travel. And sometimes we have trauma lodged in our soul. Sometimes we have ancestry wounds that we're carrying over, even if it doesn't make complete sense. And shamanism is really about clearing that energetic field by using different modalities. Instruments are very important in shamanism to do that. My personal favorite is the drum. That's my instrument. I love it, but I'll also use the rattle. The clear quartz is a big one that I use a lot. I also like to use singing bowls, Tibetan bowls. To me, when you're doing a purification process with a client, it's all about changing the frequency of energy they're holding. And so if you're working with a shaman, they can see. And when I say see, I mean using the third eye to see. So I can give you an example because a lot of people need that, love that example of give me some hardcore data, right? So one time I was working with a client and we were doing a shamanic purification process. And basically what that is doing energy work and seeing if there's any blockages in the energetic body. And I noticed that there was a lot of blockages around her pelvic area, right, and her ovaries. And what I could see using my third eye and by intuitive data was that she had had multiple miscarriages and there was a lot of energy blockage there. And not coincidentally, she was having a really hard time with her sexuality with her partner. And so when I went over that area, I was able to feel that blockage. And so what a shaman will do is help you to clear that blockage. And I like to teach my clients how they can clear that blockage by themselves because they can. We all have the ability to do this for ourselves. It's nice to go to a practitioner because they can help you to do this. But if your practitioner can teach you how you do it yourself, even better, because then you can start clearing yourself and you can notice the energy you're carrying. So in short, I know that was a long response, but in short, shamanism is about using tools. The drum puts us in an altered state because of the theta brain waveform that gets created when we listen to repetitive drumming sounds. It's also about energy of the body, working with the energetic body. It's about lifestyle, going back to nature, going back to the things that were given to you, like the breath in your body. So it's all about coming into alignment with who you actually are, with your authentic self.
I love that explanation. And actually, thank you for being so detailed because it's easy to gloss over that and take whatever image we have in our heads from like a movie we may have seen or something like that. So thank you for actually giving us that whole picture of all those things that go into shamanism. And I'm curious about what the neuroscience says at this point. So how does neuroscience connect then with shamanism? Are there certain things that you have been able to study or measure or look at from a neuroscientific way? You mentioned the brain waves, the theta brain waves. So any other components where the shamanism and neuroscience connect together in that sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So this can all be explained by altered states of consciousness and what happens when we go into that altered state of consciousness. And it's so funny. I have to share this experience because it does tie in with your question. I went this weekend to this float tank place, and they had a device there, and I think it's called Roxiva. And you have a blindfold, and or you can close your eyes, but the blindfold is nice. And you have flashing lights and sounds, you have earphones, and you have a mat that vibrates, and it takes you through an altered state of consciousness using light and sound. And after I finished that, I had such a mood elevation and euphoria, and I was so relaxed. And I really love that experience because I was only there for 15 minutes doing a meditation. And of course, I put it on the psychedelic mode because that's just who I am. And really, what I was thinking after I left is, wow, my brain got a different experience that it never has had before, because I've never done that strobe light thing with the sound. I've gone to altered states of consciousness plenty with shamanism and plant medicine journeys, but never that way. And so I was thinking about brain chemistry and how important it is to show the brain different modalities like this. And so altered states of consciousness can create new neural pathways in the brain. It can also allow us to be in a state of relaxation. I also think on a spiritual level, it allows us to shift or transform our perception on things, and it shows us different ways of thinking about situations. So, neuroscience, when we have neuroplasticity in our brain and we're creating new neural pathways, it expands us. And through that expansive process, we can heal, we can become what we want. We are able to break down barriers or limitations that we're carrying cognitively.
That's so interesting. And, it makes me think of just kind of wondering that the things that we do every day and the patterns that we really are stuck in, be that in mental health or even addiction or different other things, these patterns that our brains are stuck in, that could be the reason why we can't get unstuck, because we're not making those neural pathways. Ordinarily, we just have our habits, we follow those. The brain already knows those patterns, it follows them. It looks back to previous experiences. So when we come across something like addiction, the brain goes, oh, I don't know, I'll take a previous experience to try and solve this, which then, of course, won't work. So this is such an interesting take on how we can actually change our physiology to support what we want to do in our healing and have those kind of breakthroughs and transformations. So this to me is so absolutely fascinating, and how you combine those two together is just so interesting and impactful. Now, you and I talked a little bit before the show about ritual. And of course, shamanism involves ritual. And this, again, is one of those things where people have all sorts of ideas of what ritual looks like. So take us through what ritual means in shamanism, what that looks like, and what people can expect when you say to someone, we're going to do a shamanistic ritual. What does that look like for them?
That is such a great question. And I'm so glad you're bringing this up so we can debunk some of those stereotypical images that we get when we hear the word ritual. Basically, what I tell clients is we already do rituals in our modern society. And what I mean by that is we celebrate birthdays every year, anniversaries, graduations, a funeral is a ritual. And so rituals to me are just celebrating or being intentional about a milestone in your life. And it doesn't have to be a celebration. It can also be a letting go process, and you could have a lot of grief in this letting go process. But we are not really intentional about giving ourselves time and space to go through these different phases of life, because we're so busy and because we're so much in this rat race of day-to-day life. So to me, what a ritual does is it allows the person going through the ritual to be intentional about either opening a new chapter in their life or closing a chapter, or celebrating a part of themselves, right? Whether that's proclaiming that you're no longer going to be doing drugs or alcohol, or if it's letting go of that toxic partner in your life that you can't be with because it's too unhealthy for you, or if it's moving to a new town, doesn't matter what it is, a ritual can help you to be intentional about that transformation or that change. Rituals for me, the way that I do them is I always incorporate nature. So I always have the client pick a type of mechanism in nature. So, for instance, a tree, right, which would represent the earth, water, the ground, air, fire. And I ask them what element feels right to you to use, right? And I'll have people say, oh man, I just love fire. I can stare into a fire for hours. Okay, we're using fire then. And fire is not a destructive symbol in shamanism. It's actually a purification symbol of purifying. So sometimes if we'll do like a letting go ritual, for example, I'll have the client write a letter and then we'll put that into the fire intentionally. There's also something called a despacho, which you are putting all the elements in a package that represent different parts of your life or different things that you want to honor. And then we put that in the fire with flowers, and it's a really beautiful ceremony. So rituals can be really anything. I always have clients invite whoever they want to, whether that be family, spouses, friends. And I tell them it could just be you and I, or you can invite your tribe, is what I call it. We invite your tribe. And then we make it and customize it exactly to their liking. So I'll give you an example. I had a client one time, and his whole theme of his life was wearing a mask and having this bondage through being inauthentic. And he was actually a famous person and didn't feel like he could be authentic because he had the spotlight on him so much. And so we did this beautiful theatrical presentation of him he had made all of these different masks, and all of the masks represented different fake parts of himself that he had created in order to hide who he really was. And it was beautiful because he was wearing all the masks and he was taking them off one by one and telling us what they represented. And he was putting them into the fire, and he had his tribe there. And I had the fortune of living at the ocean at that time. And so after he was done with all the masks, he took it all off, and he told people his story and who he really is. And then he ran into the ocean. And I get goosebumps when I talk about each of these stories, because I will have clients from a decade ago contact me and say, I think about that ritual and that ceremony that we do literally every single day. So there's something, if we want to go to neuroscience, there's something really impactful of activating the amygdala, where you remember something that was very impactful for you. And actually, that's how we know trauma is formed in the brain, is when that amygdala is activated and it holds on to that traumatic experience. Well, we can use the amygdala for good as well, with these powerful transformational happy moments that he had with his tribe. So that's an example of a ritual or a ceremony. And it's not limited to any specific event. It's whatever the client feels like they need to be intentional about.
Yeah, it sounds like a very individual and profound experience tailored to that client's needs and what they're looking for to change, obviously, in their lives. So a very unique approach, again, to healing and to mental health, to addictions. And what do you find is sort of the efficacy of this? I mean, we often, especially in mental health, medication is a big thing, and talk therapy is a big thing. Where can we place experiences like what you are working with and what you're providing? Are you seeing changes that actually last? I mean, you said clients that you had a decade ago, right? Are you seeing these experiences last and really create change? So are people able to break their addictions? Are people able to have some kind of healing in their lives through these modalities that you offer?
Yes, absolutely. I see it all the time. I think the magic in that, though, is maintenance, right? Because if we look at a brain scan And we actually did this with the treatment center I worked at, which is so fascinating because we would see their pre-brain and their post-brain after they left treatment. I mean, in just 90 days, the brain was so different than it was before. It's incredible. And I used to give a talk to the family members, and I would show them these pre-post brains, not identifying who the person is, of course, but showing them that your brain can stay as this post brain, which is the healthier brain, but you've got to do the work. You've got to continue to do the work. You can't just have this impactful transformational experience and expect the brain to just stay that way for the rest of your life. And I'm going to put this in here. This is controversial, but that's okay. I think sometimes people want to go do these ayahuasca ceremonies, which I've done and I love, and I think they can be extremely impactful if you're in the right phase of your life to do them. But I believe that people are seeking out these sorts of transformational experiences for a magic pill solution, a one and done. I'm going to go to Peru and have this ayahuasca experience, and I'll be healed from there. And yes, they're extremely impactful. And those of you that are listening that have done them, you know that they can definitely be life-changing. But you've got to continue to do the work to maintain where you are, or even maybe get to a higher frequency level than that, right? But I really am a huge proponent of continuing to do the work. So yes, these rituals, ceremonies, shamanic journeying, the doing that sort of altered states work can be extremely impactful, and it can shift a person's brain and perception. However, we have got to continue to do that inner work. We can't ignore the inner work, and it's a lifelong process. And that's what Jungian says, is it's a never-ending journey. And I truly believe if we want to change, then we've got to continue to care for ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense to me, especially going back to what you said before about neuroplasticity, because of course, once we stop working on it, neuroplasticity starts changing things. So it's a good thing when we want to change things for the positive. But of course, if we don't maintain that, the change can also go in a different direction. So it makes sense that we want to put in that time and that care for ourselves going forward. And wow, you don't just put oil in a car once in your life, right? You know that you have to maintain that to keep it running. So we're similar in that sense that we also should give ourselves the love and care and attention to continually support our well-being and our mental health. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Perfectly said.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And, it's funny because clients will laugh when they hear that I have a therapist and I have a Reiki healer and I have a practitioner that I go to. And, I'm doing all this thing on myself because I have to maintain this healthy spot in order to help other people. And I think it's important that we all have someone that we work with. Doesn't have to be a therapist necessarily, but a healer. It could be anybody that you feel like you can do the work with.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That makes so much sense to me. And many people don't have that. And I think their lives would really change if they did care for themselves in that sense going forward. So, yeah. Now, you've gathered a lot of wisdom through all this work that you've been doing and the studies you've been doing, and you've written several books. So, tell us what the books are called and what they're about.
Right. So thank you for that. I always forget that I did that because it almost is, I kind of like blacked out during that during that phase, as you know, Petra, because you're also an author. It's a long, gruesome phase in your life. So, but yes, I have two books out, both co-written with Dr. Frank Lawless, who is a master in the field. He sat on the Dr. Phil show for a while and on that board. And so that's how people really know him. But I know him personally, and he is a shaman. He is an incredible person. So I had the honor of writing two books with him. And one is Nature and Animal Rituals, which talks about different animals and the rituals that you can go through. And we've kind of created different ceremonies and rituals that you can do for yourself based on the animal. So if you're a peacock, it's about being bold with who you are. So we describe a ceremony that you can do for yourself to be bold. And then the other book is Neuroplasticity Protocols for Addiction. And that one is a really interesting read because it converges neuroscience in the addiction field. So if you're interested in those fields, it's a really fascinating read. We do put a lot of case studies in there that are not directly based on real clients, but just examples of the work that we're talking about. And it is more of a textbook, but if you are a practitioner in the field, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, those sound wonderful. And of course, bringing animals into things is always so fun. And especially the animal lovers out there, working with animal guides or animal visualizations or anything like that. It's just such a wonderful experience. So highly recommend that you guys check out those books. And of course, we'll be linking to those books in the show notes as well so that you know where to find them. And you have some exciting things coming up as far as programs and services. So tell us a little bit about that.
You're right. So I have created 2 courses to start, and I'll continue to create because that's who I am. And one of the courses is modern day shamanism, and it's how to converge shamanism into your modern day life. Because let's face it, not a lot of us can go out into the woods every week and go work with a shaman. So how can we do this in our day-to-day life? And the second course is tapping into your internal medicine. And that's about finding your life purpose. And in shamanism, the belief is we all have a unique medicine or purpose, just like our fingerprint. And it's so unique, but so often we neglect it. And we do jobs that, of course, we have to make ends meet. That's a thing. But this is a course that's going to help you to figure out what is that medicine. And it doesn't even have to be a career. It can be anything else. But I'm really excited about that work because I so often hear people come to me because they don't know what their purpose is. I think that's probably for me, maybe that's my niche, but the number one complaint I hear is I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life and I feel lost.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that and how that impacts you when you lose your sense of alignment and your sense of purpose in life and what that does to your well-being. So we will also link to your programs and your services in the show notes so our listeners can go check those out. And I have a feeling that after this episode, probably a lot of listeners will want to work with a shaman, but if they can't find one or can't access one, then your courses will be there to guide them through some of those elements as well, and they can experience that in their own lives. So that sounds like a wonderful first step if they want to get to know more about shamanism and try that out in their own lives. So thank you so much for putting that wonderful information together and available for listeners and everyone around the world. Can't wait to check those courses out, and we will be linking to them in the show notes. So anyone listening who has piqued their curiosity throughout this episode, now that we've been talking about shamanism and neuroscience, check out those courses and you can experience some of what Laura talked about today for yourself. And of course, later on, maybe they can connect for a ritual or an in-person course as well. So lots of different avenues for our listeners to get in touch there. And I just want to thank you for coming back today and sharing this past half hour with us. It has been such a pleasure to host you again. And I learned so many new things again in this episode. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. And I can't wait to continue to collaborate with you in the future.
Yeah, I look forward to the summer. Like I said, we're cooking up some things together. So everyone stay tuned. We'll be talking about that in a little while. We'll be sending out more information. So stay tuned for the magical surprises we have planned for the summer. And thank you, Laura, for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and shining your light in the world and giving people these opportunities for their own healing and to find their own alignment. So thank you so much and take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.